All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. We do educational videos on this channel, and they are targeted toward great theories of everything. All-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, cosmologies, things that will help you with your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your holistic worldview, and your overall health, mental, physical, spiritual. And today is our 17th video on Daniel Ingram's book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And Ingram is an American who has spent many long hours on the cushion in monasteries over in the Far East, Burma, Malaysia, and has brought back many gems and is able to share them in English. So it's a valuable book, especially in terms of reference for maps of consciousness and procedure toward awakening and the end of suffering. Now, we are in a chapter on the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, and he's gone over the first two. The first one is there is suffering. The second is there is a cause of suffering. And now we're about to start Noble Truth number 3. There is the end of suffering. This brings us nicely to the third Noble Truth, the end of suffering. Now, as noted before, there are 3 types of suffering pertaining to the scope of each of the 3 trainings. Traditionally, the Buddha talked about, now remember the 3 trainings are training in morality, training in concentration, and training in insight meditation. Traditionally, the Buddha talked about the end of suffering as relating to mastering the 3rd training and thus becoming awakened. The first point is that it can be done and is done today by meditators like you from many spiritual traditions. Yes, there are awakened people walking around, and not just a rare few that have spent 20 years in a cave in Tibet. This is essential to have faith in and understand. The other point is that with the end of fundamental desire, the end of compassion and reality being filtered through illusory dualistic perception, there is the end of fundamental suffering. That's it. Done is what has to be done. Gone, 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 beyond, and all of that. All beings can do it, and there is, to make a bit of a mystical joke, no time like the present. Now, it must be said that the Buddha also praised those who had mastered the other 2 trainings to some degree and thus eliminated what suffering could be eliminated by those methods. Even very accomplished and transformed beings can benefit from mastering the concentration states. However, there are some complex and difficult issues related to eliminating all the ordinary suffering in the world, while there are still living beings, such as yourself. And these issues are thus related to mastering the first training, which is an ongoing undertaking. It is because of this issue that such teachings as the Bodhisattva vow arose. All right, now we come to the truth number 4. Noble truth number 4, the Noble Eightfold Path. The fourth noble truth is the Noble Eightfold Path. that leads to the end of suffering, or to suffering's cessation. And the Eightfold Path is 1, right view, 2, right intention, 3, right speech, 4, right action, 5, right livelihood, 6, right effort, 7, right mindfulness, and 8, right concentration. Another list. Hopefully you have come to like these by now. And so one more should be viewed as another manageable guide on how to find the end of suffering. Luckily, we have already seen the whole of the Noble Eightfold Path in other parts of some of the other lists, and it is summarized in the 3 trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom. The morality section is just broken down into 3 specifics: right action, right speech, and right livelihood. Right means skillful or conducive to the end of suffering for us and for all other living beings. Be kind, honest, clear, and compassionate in your every action or of body, speech, and mind, and in all contexts. And if you can't do that, at least do no harm. Notice that nothing is excluded here. The more of our lives we integrate with the spiritual path, the better, the better. Easy to remember and a powerful guide. These practices are designed to eliminate ordinary suffering in this ordinary life by ordinary means. The concentration section contains 3 things we saw in the 5 spiritual faculties and the 7 factors of awakening: right energy, right concentration, and right mindfulness. These teachings are designed to facilitate attaining access to the jhanas and to be able to eliminate the suffering that those temporary but skillful states can eliminate. The wisdom section has the 2 last parts of the path: right view and right intention. These 2 are often rendered in different ways, but the meaning is the same. Understand the truth of your experience and aspire to kindness and wisdom in your thoughts and deeds. These eliminate the fundamental and all-pervasive suffering that comes from fundamental ignorance. 3 types of suffering, 3 trainings to address them. Again, simple but powerful. Okay, that's the end of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 is called Objects for Insight Practices. Okay, insight practices, remember, is the procedure that we go through for the 3rd training, the training in wisdom. And this leads to a fundamental wisdom. If done properly, it's a tall order. But like he said, there are people who have done it. As mentioned already, there are lots of insight traditions, and they each have their preferred meditation objects. Whereas from the point of view of pure insight, the object of meditation doesn't matter. As with physical postures, there are some practical considerations related to our specific abilities and our current phase of practice that are worth considering. Please note that no objects are specifically objects for insight practice versus concentration practice. Any object can be used for either. Emphasis, at least in general terms. The difference is whether we investigate the 3 characteristics of experience. Again, that is, the 3 characteristics are impermanence, dissatisfactoriness, and no self. All of the phenomena that we experience through our sense impressions and through our mind are impermanent. They do not have the ability to satisfy, and they are not us. Okay, so any object can be used for either emphasis, at least in general terms. The difference is whether we investigate the three characteristics of experience when using those objects, or ignore the fact that the object we focus on delivers individual sensations and thus artificially solidify it while tuning into beneficial qualities of experience. Thus, you could use any of the objects mentioned below, as well as many others, for either type of practice. Okay, I'm going to just go off on a little bit of an aside here, just seeing a little bit of linkage. I was actually debating when we finished kind of our almost year and a half long unit on the reciprocal system. I was trying to decide what to go with next, and I ended up choosing this book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. But it was kind of in competition with Buckminster Fuller's magnum opus that is called Synergetics. And the subtitle of Synergetics is The Geometry of Thinking. And so for Fuller, we live in a four-dimensional world based on tetrahedrons, not cubes. And really, you're talking about the same thing. They have the same boundaries, the same vertexes. One cube has the same vertexes as a star tetrahedron, two interlocking tetrahedrons. But when you use the geometry of thinking, it's similar to this concept here, where you have really the entire tetrahedron is seen as being four-dimensional, or it requires four vertexes. And then you have the faces of the geometrical object, and those faces are two-dimensional. Now, we can call a thing three-dimensional. That's really the way I see it, is that we have 3 dimensions plus a 0 dimension. So there are 4 total dimensions, but one of them is 0. So you can call it 4 or 3. And so you have this 3-dimensional tetrahedron. 2 dimensions are the faces, or the areas bounded by the lines and the vertexes. And then you have the lines that are 1-dimensional. And then you have the vertexes. And the vertexes are really, you would see them as 3-dimensional. But when you zoom in on them, they dissolve. And you zoom in on one vertex, and it turns into another geometrical figure. So it's kind of like if you isolate the different aspects of the tetrahedron, they disintegrate, just like our experience does, our continuity of experience does when viewed through our insight practices, looking for the 3 characteristics. And we're left with another geometrical object that also has vertexes that are even smaller. And so I think it's very analogous. Although I don't believe I explained it very well. But practice makes perfect. I'll probably have another chance to explain it either in this unit or when we actually do study Buckminster Fuller's synergetics. But I think that is what he was getting at. The first question is whether we have a specific agenda for what kind of sensations or focus we wish to include in the practice. That is, whether we want to do choiceless awareness practice or a more structured practice. Choiceless awareness practice is a bit of a misnomer in that we are making a choice in relative terms to be more liberal with what attention does and where it goes. From an ultimate point of view, everything is causal and natural, meaning there is no individual chooser. But that is making things too complex at this stage of the game. So for the moment, as the term choiceless awareness is in common usage for less structured and less directed investigation, I will use it. Choiceless awareness practice, in which we investigate whatever arises without a specific or narrow focus, has the advantage of being very inclusive and natural. And yet, by the same token, some people can easily get distracted, spaced out, and ungrounded when they don't take a more structured approach. I put natural here in quotes, as even all the sensations that make up experiences, like the sense of having a choice, the sense of exerting effort, and the sense of applying a technique, are just as natural, since they are simply causal occurrences, just like everything else. But still, in relative terms, choiceless awareness does feel more natural. For those taking a more structured approach, some of the axes we can move along are the degree to which we include physical or mental sensations in meditation, whether we focus narrowly or use a more open field of attention, and whether we move the attention around or keep it in roughly the same place, and what we do with that attention when objects arise and vanish. The main advantage of trying to focus primarily on physical sensations, such as the breathing process, the sensations of walking, the points of contact with the floor, or the sensations of our physical body in general, is that these are much less susceptible to story making than observing mental sensations. As my friend Vince wanted me to point out, the location of the physical sensations we choose can have important energetic implications. Noticing the top of the head or the breath at the nostrils may be more energy producing than noticing the sensations of our feet or of breathing in the abdomen. Similarly, noticing the breath in our abdomen and the sensations of our feet may be more grounding and centering than noticing our breath at the nose area or paying attention to the top of the head. That's pretty interesting. Knowing this may allow you to balance your level of energy by simply shifting the focus of your attention to physical sensations. Further, if we are habitually lost in our heads, increasing the strength of the wiring to the sensations of our chests and abdomens may help integrate those aspects of our body into our practice. Lots of emotions can have strong components in those locations that more cranially fixated practitioners can benefit from getting to know more clearly. However, if emotions are overwhelming you, the nose is clearly safer territory. Having both options and realizing their pros and cons can be helpful when making good choices about how to direct attention. Mental sensations tend to trap us in content and stories, as anyone who has ever tried to meditate knows all too well. The more mental sensations we include in our practice, the more we will encounter our emotional and psychological stuff. This can be a mixed blessing. If our practice is very strong, we can enter mental and emotional territory and yet still see the true nature of all the sensations that make it up. Doing so can truly be transformative in good ways. If our practice is not very strong, we will be swept away, lost in the habitual pattern of thinking associated with our stuff. Thus, physical sensations help ground us, and mental sensations open us up to plunging into the depths of mental life, or, more often, getting caught up in it, further identified with it, or otherwise lost in it until our practice is strong. From a pure insight perspective, neither one is more holy or more of a source of truth than the other. But when we do the experiment, we will quickly realize what works for us. Works, in this case, means that we can keep up being able to see the true nature of the numerous quick sensations that make up our reality. There are many other types of physical objects that may be investigated, including sounds, sights, and even smells and tastes. Some people have a natural proclivity for investigating the sensations of a specific sense door. There is a monk in Burma who recommends that his students use the high-pitched tones in our ear as an object. And sometimes I have found them very useful and interesting. Rather than seeming to be a continuous tone, we can hear each little individual sensation of ringing as a discontinuous entity. We may also take sights as object, such as the colors on the back of our eyelids, or if our eyes are open, whatever visual sensations present themselves. These are also impermanent, and if we are good at this, we may even see our visual world presenting itself like the frames of a movie or a complex, flickering, organic patchwork of shifting impressions. Another consideration is whether to use narrow or broad focus of attention. The advantage of a narrower focus of attention for beginners is that it can exclude many distractions. We may get very good at seeing certain types of objects, such as the sensations of breathing in the abdomen or beneath the nostrils, and this is just fine and even a very good idea. Such one-pointed practice is routinely recommended, and some people, such as myself, have a natural inclination toward this style. Others find that this makes them too upright, agitated, or irritable. They find that they do much better with a broader and more inclusive field of attention. These things vary with person, situation, and phase of practice. If we are honest with ourselves, we will be able to recognize what works for us and what does not. The advantage of a broad field of attention is that less effort is required for staying focused, and we can thus be more present to whatever arises naturally. The downside is that we may become very lazy meditators and space out or get lost in thought. These trade-offs must be weighed against each other, depending on context, and as time goes on, we adjust the breadth of our practice repeatedly depending on what is happening. There is much more specific information related to the breadth of attention presented later, as it is a fascinating topic. There are practices such as body sweeping from the tradition of U Ba Kin and popularized by S.N. Goenka that keep the attention moving all the time. This can be very helpful as it keeps us engaged with new and interesting sensations and may keep us from getting into the ruts of thinking that we are attending to new physical sensations when really we are just remembering old patterns of them. However, these practices have the downside of sometimes lacking the real precision of honest attention that comes from staying with more restricted areas of focus. We can end up giving more attention to keeping our attention moving than to clearly investigating what our attention reveals. Again, some people do well with the moving attention practices, and some seem to thrive on keeping the attention in one general area. We may not always know exactly what is best for us. We may pick practices that feel good to us precisely because they don't strike too close to home, don't allow us to clearly investigate the unsettling truths of impermanence, suffering, and no self, and don't strike at our sense of solid identity in a way that really cuts to the bone. We might also pick traditions that are grueling and painful for us because we imagine that this is how it must be, even if such traditions do not necessarily facilitate clear investigations of the truth of our actual experience, the setting and opening that would help. Thus, I recommend working with good teachers who can advise us about which meditation object might be best suited to our disposition, which might help keep us from resting in our delusions. That said, some teachers only teach one practice, usually the one that worked for them or in which they trained. If that is also a technique that genuinely works for us, then we're set. If not, we may wish to investigate other traditions and techniques. On a related note, I have advocated figuring out what works for you, considering how you are built and where you are. I do, however, recommend moderation in this. For instance, you might sit down to meditate and then decide that you are just a bit sleepy, so you stand up and then settle down a bit, and a few minutes later you sit down again. Then a minute later you decide you really don't like that, little pain in your knee, and so you lie down, and so it goes. Such practice, if you can call it that, is unlikely to be of benefit. So try to pick a posture and stick to it within reason. Patience with pain and discomfort is the doorway to achieving higher levels of equanimity later, albeit in some medically safe way. The ability to stay with our chosen practices also applies to meditation objects, particularly when you are starting out. There is a lot to be said for cultivating this basic level of self-control and discipline. Without it, we can end up shifting our practice habits every time our investigation begins to hit too close to home. Okay, this section is called When, Where, and For How Long. The best time to meditate is anytime you can. The best place to meditate is wherever you can, and the best duration is for as long as possible or necessary for you to get what you wish out of it. This may seem obvious, but people can sometimes get into their heads that certain times are better than others, and thus not meditate when that seemingly sacrosanct period is unavailable or interrupted. They may feel that special places or special circumstances, special cushions, special noise levels, special surroundings, special props, special garments, etc. are oh so necessary. And if these are not available, when they may feel frustrated and unable to practice. They may feel that a certain minimal amount of meditation time is necessary and thus find themselves unable to make use of whatever time they do happen to have. A more immediate answer is that you should meditate now, where you are, and make your life your meditation in all its aspects. I remember going to a spiritual bookstore in New Delhi, India, and asking the proprietor about some books on meditation I was trying to find. We got into a conversation, and I asked him if he meditated. He was dusting off a book at the time, And he said with a twinkle in his eye, "This is my meditation." To some, this may seem trite, like some sort of idealized New Age dream, but it is where this all leads. So you might as well start getting used to it. If you have 2 hours each day for meditation, great. If you have 2 jobs, 6 kids, and just can't find more than 5 minutes each day for meditation, make good use of what you've got. There have been times in my life when I was very grateful that I had 20 hours a day to practice. On the other hand, when I've had only 10 minutes a day for formal practice, I have been grateful for the sense of how precious those 10 minutes were. Skillful urgency and well-developed gratitude for a chance to practice at all can allow us to really use limited stretches of time to their fullest. If you can take off a month each year for intensive retreats, wonderful. If a weekend retreat once a year is all you can do, go for it. In short, honor where you are and what you can realistically accomplish given your current circumstances. If these are not entirely to your liking, and you want to take more time for practice, work on rearranging things in a way that leaves you with a life that you still find fulfilling should you later decide to practice a bit less. Luckily, meditation is an extremely portable endeavor. You don't have to lug around special equipment, have other people around, or schedule an appointment. There are no fees, waiting lists, or red tape. Reality happens, sensations arise. That's why they don't advertise it, because you can't make any money off of it. Although meditation teachers do make money and so on. But, the raw experience is absolutely free. If you're paying careful attention to them, sensations arise. If you're paying careful attention to them, really feeling exactly what it is like to be here now, you're doing it. It's just that simple. Nearly all activities benefit from increased attention. So this paradigm of increasing daily life presence transmutes your seemingly non-meditative activities into meditation. While I have come to appreciate ideal meditation conditions and their obvious benefits, I have also had profound insights and extraordinary experiences in places that would readily be considered, that would not readily be considered ideal, would hardly be considered ideal, such as in the break room at work or while brushing my teeth. While I